I moved to Canada thinking I would walk into a six-figure role at a big tech company within a few months. And I had years of enterprise experience. I worked at a Fortune 500 company in India. I have built dashboards that run at scale across different regions and organization. And I've spent 1.5 years navigating the PR process, checking my CRS score after every express entry draw waiting. And none of that matters as much as I thought it would. What I'm going to share you today is not the polished version of my Canada story. It is a real one, the version with parts of something that nobody puts into a LinkedIn celebration post. If you are internationally trained data professional who has just moved to Canada or even thinking about it, this video is specifically for you because I wish someone has sat me through and told me what I am about to tell you. First, how I actually got to Canada because it is not the route most people take. I did not come as an international student. I did not come on a spousal visa. I came through pure express entry and it took me 3 attempts and 1.5 years to get here. My first application was rejected, but it didn't stop me there. I resigned from my job at Verizon before I left. No jobs lined up on the side, and just a PR stamp, one way ticket, and the belief that my experience and my work ethic would be enough. And I want to sit with that for a second because I think a lot of people who are planning this move underneath or underestimate themselves on how that moment actually feels when it arrives. What I did not fully understand was that when eventually moved on from that role, which is natural progression in my any career, I would be entering the Canadian job market as someone who was still relatively new to the country. And the Canadian job market has a very specific relationship with the phrase Canadian experience. Now, let me talk about the Canadian experience because if you are an internationally trained professional in Canada, you have either heard this phrase or about to. So, Canadian experience is an informal requirement that shows up in an hiring conversation that essentially means like we want someone who has already worked in Canada and in this specific market and in this specific way of working. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. Every market has its own culture, its own communication norms, and its own way of doing things, right? But here is what nobody tells you. Your international experience, the experience you built over several years, sometimes even decades, is not discounted because it's of low quality. It is discounted because it is unfamiliar, and unfamiliar makes hiring managers uncomfortable. And I had enterprise analytics experience from a Fortune 500 company in India. I had managed stakeholders across multiple continents. I have spent a year and a half fighting and waiting and hoping to get the right to work here. And I still walked into interviews where I could feel that the hesitation about my skills, about whether I would fit in, etc. So, this is the wall, and I'm hitting it for the first time when you are far away from your home, when you have already made enormous sacrifices to be here, is one of the most disorienting professional experience I've ever had. But here is the other side of it, that wall is real, to be honest, but it is not the permanent. And your international experience does eventually becomes your differentiator, and I will come back to that. Now, at the hardest section here is I want to be honest. In January 2026, I was laid off, and I wanted to be honest about what that felt like. Not a LinkedIn post version where you would talk about exciting new chapters, but an actual version. When you get laid off in a new country that is not the one you grew up in, there is a layer to it that people who have not experienced it do not fully understand. Sometimes it's a visa status, your sense of belonging, your financial stability, all of it is concerned to that job in a way that it simply is not when you are in your home country. So I did not have my home country as safety net to fall back on. What I had was my skill, my LinkedIn network, and the discipline that I built over years of working in data profession. And I had something I did not fully recognize as an asset at that time, and because I had my values. I knew what kind of work environment I need to thrive, and I knew what kind of team I needed around me. And I had even enough self awareness to know that taking any job just to fill the gap would make things work, not better. So that self knowledge was tested very directly about 3 months into my job search. In April 2026, I actually received a job offer. So the logical thing that anyone would tell me to do was to take it. But I had to turn it down. Reason being, the role was not wrong for me technically, but because the people I was communicating with throughout the process were not communicating with respect. There were things in how I was being spoken to, in how informations were being handled, in the basic professionalism of interaction that told me something about the environment I would be walking into. And I had already lived through what it feels like to work somewhere else that does not value a healthy communication, and I've already paid that price, and I was not willing to pay it again, even in the middle of job search, even in a country where I was still finding my footing. I had little bit of noises coming into my brain saying, did you make a wrong decision? But I still kept on applying. I kept showing up on LinkedIn. I kept building my skills. I even passed my PL 300 certification during the same period. And eventually, not immediately, but eventually, I landed a contract role at one of the Canada's biggest five banks, and at a better company with better people doing the work that genuinely matters. The offer I turned down led me to the offer I actually wanted. Not because the universe is like tidying and things always work out, but because I knew what I was worth and I refused to accept less because I was scared. And now I want to talk about the skills that saved me in Canada that I never mentioned that I never saw mentioned in any immigration guide or any LinkedIn post, any YouTube video about moving abroad for work. The skill is nothing but patience. Not passive waiting, but not giving up and calling it acceptance. Active, intentional patience, continuing to build, continuing to show up, continuing to invest in yourself while the market moves at its own pace. The Canadian job markets move slower than you expect. Saw this having come from a work culture where things move fast, where decisions were made quickly, if you are good enough, the recognition comes relatively quickly. But Canada is not like that. Hiring processes usually takes months, relationships take longer to build, trust is earned over time in a way that feels almost slow when you're used to a faster environment. And what I wish someone had told me before I have arrived at this, the timeline you had in your mind is wrong. Whatever you think it will take, double it. Not because Canada is different, difficult, or unwelcoming, but because building a sustainable career here is a slow compounding process, not a sprint. The professionals I have watched struggled most in Canada are the ones who fought the pace instead of working with it. How got frustrated were that their CV weren't landing immediately, and also who took a first offer out of panic instead of waiting for the right one. And the ones I watched succeeded eventually are the ones who got comfortable being in the building phase longer than they expected. If I could sit down with a version of myself that was about to move to Canada, here is exactly what I would say. Build your LinkedIn presence before you arrive, not after. The Canadian job market is relationship driven in a way that cold applications cannot overcome. Your LinkedIn profile, your content, your visibility, these open doors eventually. I started building mine while I was still employed, and I became one of my most career asset. My international experiences is not a weakness, and it felt like one in certain rooms, and the companies, managers who cannot see the value of your global perspective are not the ones you actually want to work for anyway. So you can get certified. Some of the skill sets like PL 300, Tableau certificates, whatever is relevant to your stack, Canadian hiring managers use certification as proxy for commitment and current knowledge when they do not have years of local work history to evaluate. So that gives them that signal. Another thing is to build something publicly, like a portfolio project, a GitHub portfolio, a YouTube channel, a LinkedIn newsletter article, something that shows about your thinking, your skills, your voice outside a job application. This is what makes you more memorable when everyone else is just a resume in a pile. And finally, know your values before the market tests them, because it will test them. There will be a situation or a moment probably when you are most tired and scared, where someone offers you something that is not quite right. The clarity you build now about what you need to do your best work is what protects you the most at that moment. So right now in June, here is where I work as a BI developer in a contract at one of the Canadian big bank. I started working in a project that uses every skill sets of the skill sets that I built over the years. I have had 9,000 plus LinkedIn followers. I built the audience while working full time, while also job searching, while also going through one of the most uncertain period in my professional life. And it is that audience that is going to help me build what comes next. So if you are in the middle of that journey right now, I see you and I'm making this channel for you. If any part of this story sounded familiar, do please subscribe. I post every videos on Wednesday, and this channel is specifically for those data professional navigating careers in Canada and beyond. If you are going through something similar to that I've described today, such as a job search, a career transition, or even a Canadian experience wall, do drop a comment below because tell me where you are on the journey. I read every single comment and it helps me also to know what to make next. So see you at Wednesday.